Okay, perfect. Okay, great. Welcome everyone, and welcome to Invasive Species Creative Proposal Series. My name is Gaia Mejnaric-Osale, and I come from Trajna Association. And here with me is also Alisa Denise, calling from Baltimore, I think. And it's our first event that we're co-hosting together. First of all, I would like to say that we're hosting this event from Crater, a new production space for working with invasive plants in Ljubljana. Crater is standing in an overgrown construction site and offers to local designers, permaculture practitioners, and architects a space to test invasive plants and other organic waste as an alternative resource for creating paper, wood, and mycelium-based products. Besides eco-social practitioners at Crater, there are also many other artists, herbalists, and ecologists working on creative solutions to spread of invasive plant species, who are equally active in challenging the current toxic, capital-centric, xenophobic, warlike paradigm that is setting up policies for the management of these green beings. So Invasive Species Creative Proposal Series is initiated, as said, and hosted by Crater and Eclipse Herbal from Alisa Denise, and presents each of these earth workers as practitioners of the land. Our endeavors provides a collective platform to share our values and approaches to our work regarding holistic understanding and interaction with novel ecosystems. And this series of virtual lectures happening across continents and various time zones hopefully inspires us to learn from each other and collectively think of how our local actions with invasive plants might kick off a bigger movement in the future. We are really grateful for all of you joining us today, practitioners and listeners, in the moments where we are still figuring out the format of our gatherings and what the next steps might be. Invasive Species Creative Proposal Series has been kindly supported by the project RUC, a network of art and culture research centers working on the crossroads of art, science, and technology. The project is co-financed by the Republic of Slovenia and the European Union under the European Regional Development Fund. And now, to kick off our first talk of the Invasive Species Creative Proposal Series, will be held by Alisa Denise of Eclipse Herbal. Alisa is an interdisciplinary artist, educator, and clinical herbalist practicing in Baltimore, USA. Her work deploys ecological literacy through the cultural invisible practice of herbal medicine and land stewardship. She's particularly interested in accepting and integrating the virtues of plant intelligence as a solution to climate change that positively restructures our relationship with the land. One that is rooted in place-based identity, which reestablishes reciprocity, respect, and responsibility with our non-human kin. Today, Alisa will address the social and ecological motives of her project, the Invasive Apothecary, and discuss the medicinal attributes of some of the worst in terms of invasive plant species. More importantly, Alisa will show us the erasure of traditional ecological knowledge about these plants and how this has been abandoned at the expense of disassociating the fact that their curative human virtues directly mirror the remedial virtues for the land. And just before we start, I would like to kindly invite you, if you have any questions during Alisa's presentation, you can post them in the Zoom chat. And we will also have like a 15 minutes Q&A session at the end where we're really encouraging you to ask questions, like give us some comments, and yeah, maybe some insights from your side. And now I'd like to hand over to Alisa. And yes, really looking forward for your lecture.
Awesome. Thank you, Gaia. That was so great. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming. Really excited to present this all to you. And I'm just gonna get started. So let me just put this down at the bottom here. All right, so the invasive apothecary. This is sort of a working subtitle, but I really feel that this is a healing journey towards caring for the land and curing plant blindness. I think that's a real problem within the way that we manage land. So I'm gonna just go through the motives of my project for about 25 minutes and then talk about the medicinal aspect of some invasive plants that specifically will have a lot to do with water and water in the body, water in land, the limit of water in certain parts of land and plants bringing water to certain areas, specifically within urban areas. So, and then we'll have hopefully a little bit of time at the end for questions. So I just would like to thank my teachers. These are not all of them, obviously, but my human teachers for any education that I present myself. And then also my plant teachers. I very, very much learn from the plants themselves, and I continue to do that and learn how to do that and learn their language, which is something we're gonna talk a lot about tonight. And I just wanna kind of put this out there that this talk is not condoning the proliferation of or planting or cultivation of invasive species, only proposing and activating creative solutions to toxic herbicide use and challenging these common held perspectives of capital-centric, xenophobic, warlike rhetoric around the good and the bad rhetoric that we use. Kind of put that on the table. And then just what is this project really about? The land is sacred. It belongs to the countless numbers who are dead, the few who are living, and the multitudes of those yet to be born. And I really live by that. So this is both an art project and also an herbal pharmacy. So it has practical application, but it also lives within concept, and art projects are constantly developing. The medicine is always developing, how to administer that, learning from the plants. And then it's also about reclaiming cooperative symbiosis with the land, respect, responsibility, and reciprocity. And instead of continuing to spread fear and encourage hate around plant species that may or may not be invasive. This project really is about sacred economics rather than patriarchal economy. So it lives within an abundance consciousness and cyclical growth, resourcefulness, mindfulness, gratitude, instead of profit worship, ego, perceptual consumption. I mean, these are all very familiar with, most of you will be familiar with this. So it's also about addressing sustainability issues within the herbal market. This is a big point for me as an herbalist, and seeing popular herbs sort of fly off shelves and ecosystems be disrupted in the indigenous areas where a lot of this medicine comes from. So despite health and wellness goals, corporate accountability, ethics, and sustainability are not inherently guaranteed. So we live in a culture, in the sort of industrial culture, that's sort of out of balance. And I always like to frame it within this yin and yang approach. These are Chinese medicine terms. So we sort of live in a very yang dominated culture. We love manifestation. We love movement, especially within New York, where this project really started. It absolutely did start in New York. So outward energy, this building of heat, everything's got to move, everything's got to be progress. We constantly live in a sympathetic state where we don't nourish our yin, we don't uphold dream time, we don't relax enough, we don't nourish ourselves. And that's really, I sort of made this image of the yin yang, like we don't focus on root work, we don't focus on the soil, the soil and the roots are sort of invisible to us because we have such a dominated culture where we only think about what's above and the manifestation of this tree, which is important. These are important, but they have to be in balance. So, and I love this quote by Brendan Kelly. He's an herbalist. The earth has become yin deficient, and this book is all about that. But when we have a yin and yang balance, we have a harmonious earth. And then if we live in excess yang, we live in a toxic world that is dried out and has excess heat. And those are really key. This is really key for the rest of this talk. So just sort of like have this image in your mind going through. And really my big question is, what is the health of the terrain when we talk about invasive plants? And I really do believe that to tackle and reverse the damages of climate change, it's intimately intertwined with capitalist greed and versus mutualism. So, and this is so tightly connected to the health of the soil, which brings me to, okay, so let's solve root problems, not simply combat branching symptoms. So I really believe that invasive plants are a branching symptom of a very deep constitutional problem. And this is an image that you'll see later when I start talking about the medicine, because this is a quote unquote disease tree developed by herbalists Stephen Horn and Thomas Easley. And so when I meet with a client, I talk to them about their constitutional health. So do they have nutritional deficiencies? Is there physical trauma? Because these will manifest within the body as, hay fever, asthma, cancer, heart disease, these types of things. So I'm not ever dealing with branching symptoms. I'm like trying to figure out what's the constitutional problem. And this is the same approach that I use when I think about the pervasiveness of invasive species. So what is an invasive species? Is an introduced species that is not native to a specific location and that has a tendency to spread to a degree believed to cause damage to the environment, human economy, and human health. But within this talk, I really like to kind of define what does this definition mean by believed, and also damage to the environment, human economy, and human health. I want to take a deeper dive into that because it can be really one-sided. And so what are some of the common held beliefs about invasives is that they compromise biodiversity, cause harm to the environment or human health, choke out native species, compromise soil integrity, they poison the soil, interface with industrial agriculture, modern industry, interfere, sorry. And non-native plants are somehow the only invaders. So I'm working on a sort of myth busting list that will be available on my website. And I sort of go through this list a little bit more in detail, but I don't have time to do that tonight. So when people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. And this is the Tao Te Ching. This is ancient wisdom from China that I love. So what are some of the plants that we're talking about? This is actually a list that comes from the New York Parks Department. These are the worst of the worst in terms of invasive plants in the Northeast. A lot of them are applicable to where I am in Baltimore, but they are all food and medicine. These plants come with cultural histories that go back thousands of years. Let's see. I think that's all I wanted to mention about that. So other definitions and perspectives from scientists, government agencies, land managers are these awful words: thug, nasty, useless, nuisance, aggressive. They cause infestation, they're bad boys, they terrorize. And this is a very, I think, demeaning and destructive terms. So Brendan Larson, he sort of also is involved with doing this paradigm shifting, but he really believes that these kind of metaphors that contribute to social misunderstanding and charges of xenophobia, but also loss of scientific credibility. And I absolutely agree with him. So since 2019, the US uses 1 billion pounds of pesticides each year, and approximately 5.6 billion pounds are used worldwide. US spends 120 billion every year in damages, eradication, and prevention of invasive species. The US pesticide expenditure at the producer level totals 9 billion. And who pays for this? We do, the taxpayers. So I think it's really important that we talk about what we're paying for as law-abiding citizens, and we are actually paying to toxify the land around us, and most importantly, within public parks. And there was an article in 2000, so this is important to mention, especially for New Yorkers, that they did ban pesticide use in New York City, which is amazing. And I just hope that other cities follow suit. And this initiative really started from a couple of children in elementary school, which is awesome. So glyphosate has now been proven to increase the risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma by 41%. And these toxins contribute to autoimmune, neurodegeneration, infertility, leaky gut, heart disease, and lots of others. And these are conditions that I see. I see people with these conditions, and I myself have endocrine disruption, and these may or may not be from pesticide use specifically, but these are toxins in our landscape, and we just don't need to further toxify our land intentionally. So I just shout out to Poison Parks and the Black Institute, because this is also, pesticide use is a social justice issue, because there have been countless studies where pesticide use is used more in low-income Black and Brown communities. And this project does a lot of research on that, and they are very outspoken about it. So I just encourage people to check them out. So where did these invasive plants come from? How did they get here, and why are they such a problem? So they kind of come from our same latitude, that share similar climate with us. And these plants mostly come from China, from Asian countries, Korea, Japan, because our climates are very similar. I mean, I think that's important to note, just because of the climate that we're in right now with COVID and where COVID came from. There is so much xenophobia against Asian people right now, and it's really just these plants coming from and terrorizing landscapes here in the United States is because we share the same climate. That's it. It has really nothing to do with China trying to terrorize the US. So, so here are some of the worst of the worst. So we have Japanese knotweed, we have Norway maple, we have kudzu down here, and then we have Ailanthus autisma. So most of these invasives, a lot of people will say, well, you know, they came accidentally, you know, but really these plants specifically, and probably everyone that I will talk about tonight, came here intentionally. Most of them in the 18th and 19th century for the sole purposes of reversing soil erosion, because there has been 400 years of soil depletion from colonization. So Japanese knotweed, I think actually, you know, and you'll find some of them were brought for ornamental purposes, but this is where what I've found countless times within my research. Horticultural specimens and shade trees, and more specifically for soil erosion. And mainly, you know, from deforestation, we've lost 99.9% of our old growth forests. This is absolutely devastating for ecosystems. So human disturbance leading to the spread of invasive plants. This is not something that invasive plant ecologists or people dealing with invasive plants will ever really put on the table. It's constantly the plant's fault. And how to stop the plant, but we never consider really what are the human causes and leading to this spread. So of course, the disturbance of the soil. So going back to like, what's the health of the terrain? We're constantly disturbing the soil. And once we disturb the soil, we're disturbing the diversity of that soil. And the diversity of that soil can't hold those native, that native ecosystem anymore. And I'm gonna go into that a little bit in a second, but so just reading some of these: building of roads and highways, mining, logging, overgrazing of livestock is such a huge one. And I mean, industrial agriculture is still such a huge stronghold on destroying ecosystems. Intentional planting of them, agricultural, pollution, but also fire suppression, and really a huge loss of Native American land management and tending practices, which is something else I'll talk about more. Just like some cartoons that I found that, the public is on board with this. Here's a cartoon, it's saying, this is like corporate America, right? Everything in excess, this image, right? You overpopulate the land and you destroy everything. And, nature's like, what? Yeah, sure, right. And what about yourself? So, and here is a page from Timothy Lee Scott's book, Invasive Plant Medicine. He is a Chinese herbalist, but he really did a lot of research on the invasive plant benefits, known environmental benefits to these plants. And they do indeed pull up heavy metals, they remove toxins. So this is a really excellent resource. And then just going a little bit deeper into that. So we have knotweed, phragmites, dandelion, and mugwort, and these are really edge plants. I mean, most herbs are going to be edge plants, and this is something Simone and I talked a lot about. But yeah, they're plants that live at the edges of ecosystems, and that's where they thrive the most. So phragmites being an aquatic plant, knotweed being an edge plant, and all of these others. But they, what I want to mention is that all 4 of these plants help remove heavy metals. And so they are 4 of the most prolific plants found in urban environments, where lead and other heavy metals are prevalent. So Ailanthus altisma, tree of heaven. I just love talking about this plant because it grows where nothing else will grow. So it's really a pioneer plant, and all of these plants I would consider that as well. But just some facts about this plant: can survive cement dust, just real environmental destruction. This plant can survive. So this is an excellent book by Irnfried Pfeiffer, a German anthroposophic farmer and scientist. He was a student of Rudolf Steiner, and he wrote this book really for farmers. So this was a book written in the 1950s to help farmers be able to tell what is the soil trying to tell them through the plants and weedy plants that are growing on their land. So, and this is just not a common practice anymore, even with farmers or people other land stewards or ecologists. It's like, here's a whole entire book that's dedicated to what the plant is trying to tell you about the soil. So, and we just know that weedy plants, a lot of them fix nitrogen, they pull up minerals with deep tap roots. Because we have lost many, many feet of topsoil over the 400 years. So offering ground cover to protect soil, specifically broadleaf plantain, just thinking about those broadleaf plants as protectors of the soil rather than something that is a problem. They are doing a job. So my big question is, we are only as healthy as our environment. We have growing importance of the microbiome these days for our physical, mental, and even spiritual well-being. And so I'm sort of asking, what is the health of the macrobiome, the earth itself, the soil, the water, the air? If herbicides are working to kill invasive plants, it's no stretch to conclude that they are doing irreversible damage to the ancient ancestral microbial life. I mean, I think that's absolutely true. I love the Urban Soils Institute. You guys are probably, most of you, familiar with Urban Soil Institute. They just have wonderful facts about soil, and that I think it's really just important to note that 1/4 of our planet's diversity is in the soil, and it's non-renewable in our lifetime. So once that soil is disturbed, you have disturbed the ecosystem itself, for other life to thrive. And that's just such a huge part of what I try and press upon people when we're talking about, why is this plant thriving here so much, and why is it taking over, and why is it? So let's really look at the soil. So here's just like a picture from my neighborhood. So one neighbor had a community garden. They had 3 feet of compost, but now it's grass because they just didn't want to do the community garden anymore. But here's the grass that grows in there now, versus my other neighbor who does cyclical sprays of chemical herbicide. I mean, this is just a clear image of how we're just starving the land. So I love this quote by Sherry Mitchell, Native American lawyer, teacher, activist, Penobscot, from the Penobscot Nation. The failure of industry to take responsibility for the well-being of the natural world and other human beings, and our complacency and complicity in that destruction that has resulted, are quickly taking away our right to live on this planet. And I believe that about current eradication methods and herbicide use. So this is, so 99% of cultivated corn in the US is one type. And so this is one aspect of the myth busting that I like to do. So I'm just offering an example. More will be found on my website, but I really believe that if the argument for invasive species is that they destroy biodiversity, I would just argue that industrial farming and monocropping has proven time and again to deplete soil, produce nutrient poor food, and virtually eliminate biodiversity. So these farms are intentional crowding out of native ecosystems. So just one example of that myth busting. So here are some quotes from Dow Orion. She's a restoration ecologist. So the war on invasive species is a distraction from a larger discussion about how we interact with natural resources. Native plants were and are relics of intentional management. And that's so key, intentional management, not a warlike, not a warlike action on the land. So this is Nicholas Rio. He is a citizen of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa in Michigan. And he is an ecologist and an environmental studies professor at Dartmouth College. I just love what his work is doing, because he says an approach that is rooted in kinship would say that we need people to spend more time in these places in order to foster deep, meaningful relationships with the land. And I think his quote of just spending more time is really, really key. A lot of invasive removal is like this, just pull it all out, plant those natives, let's go to the next spot. It's not a reciprocal, responsible, it's not giving respect to the land. It's just demonizing plants and demonizing non-natives, basically. And I think this is really ironic that here we have a native person to this land speaking about how to have kinship and reciprocity with invasive plants. So he works a lot with invasive cattail, which is why I put the picture there. And he really believes that this is how we need to be mitigating invasive species, is to focus on indigenous approaches to invasives. So I'm following suit. So this spending more time, I really believe, involves a multisensory engagement. And so a lot of this project has a lot to do with that. So this is why it falls under art project, but also herbal pharmacy. So we're really just trying to capitalize on how we can get all of our senses involved to really, I really believe that multisensory engagement with the land will provide all of the answers that we need for the ecological challenges which we have. And pesticides and industrial pollution simply just keep us from doing this and having this one-on-one individual engagement. It cuts us off. It's all about separation, and it's not about having human involvement that involves kinship. And this goes with what I just said, but we have to think of ourselves as necessary keystone species in an active process of control of these kinds of prolific plants. So harvesting the very parts of these plants used as medicine could exponentially increase the efforts spent on controlling their spread. And I will highlight some of that when I talk about the medicine. So to preface this next section, as I go into the medicine, I just really want to acknowledge that plant intelligence is something that the scientific world, as well as any other ecological realm, it's something that people are really thinking about and doing a lot of scientific research on. It is indigenous knowledge from all over the world. This is accepted knowledge that plants they are indeed intelligent. There's no question there, but finally we do have this cause being taken up by scientists, and here's just a few of those books. One of which is by an indigenous person, Robin Kimmerer, so thank you for her. So this is a quote from Yulia Graves from Language of the Plants. Freed from all cultural superimpositions and what we prefer to believe, plants are patterns of unfolding energy that we can detect with our senses, with colors, shapes, and tastes, taking a predictable and distinct course of coming into being, exciting and fading away. As witnessing bystanders to their mysterious dance, we are invited to listen to their song beyond concept, and will not receive their secrets for as long as we try to make them march to our tune. So here we have poison ivy and poison sumac, both native nuisances. And I like to start this off by really considering poison sumac and poison ivy's role within the ecosystem as it has to do with plant intelligence. So I really just like to ask, have we ever really deeply thought about poison ivy and poison sumac as protectors of the land? And maybe even multiflora rose and other brambles, other thorny plants in a similar way. Because these are keen reminders to humans that we need to be more aware of our environment. We need to watch where we walk, watch what we touch, who can enter and who can't. So there are some people that are allergic and others that aren't. So I feel like poison ivy and poison sumac, they're really taking a role of almost a bouncer of the land. And I really feel like this frames how I think about this entire project, is that the plants are intelligent and that they are doing some kind of job that we somehow remain unaware of. and that this project really tries to break open a little bit. And I also think of ticks in a similar way. So ticks and Lyme disease can be thought of as, you know, okay, we have to pay attention more to our body. You know, when we go into the woods, we can't just go running off and do what we want and trample everywhere. We have to remain very aware. You know, are we gonna get a tick on us? And it's really ironic that the smallest ticks are the ones that give us, are statistically the ones that give us the Lyme disease. I mean, nature itself, I mean, we are nature, but the nature that we have consistently tried to destroy is really just trying to make us more aware. So this is the intelligence that I love to talk about and love to give voice to. So anything in abundance is subject to be taken for granted. And I think that that's something we can all sort of galvanize around. Plants alone represent, so I mean, that I'm sort of referring to invasives, but also plants themselves represent 95.5% of the Earth's biomass. So more to be taken for granted. Even though we rely on everything we need, everything that we need to survive on this planet comes from plants. And I also just like to think about plants and animals in they operate in different time scales, and that's something we should consider when we think about the intelligence of plants. So this comes from my teacher, Richard Mendelbaum, very awesome advocate for this project. I mean, he's just one of my number ones. But he really puts onto the table, he said, so Berberis vulgaris, a hotbed invasive. So his question is, would Berberis vulgaris, barberry, be anything more than a marginalized weed limited to roadsides and the like if what it was experiencing here was eastern old growth rather than the sick land that it is, barely beginning to recover from 400 years of repeated clear cutting and abuse? And then he goes on to talk about how barberry and golden seal, so golden seal is an endangered woodland medicinal. It needs woodland, it needs very, very loomy, biodiverse soil in woodland areas. And it's going extinct now, and it has been very much endangered for a long time, because it doesn't have these, the ecosystem that it has evolved in. But golden seal and barberry share very similar medicinal properties. So these plants are really holding a niche and holding what hasn't been able to be supported here because of the destruction of the land. Yeah, and I would also just argue that we have denigrated and defaced indigenous knowledge to such a degree that learning about medicinal attributes of these plants can be sort of a call to action on all of that. So yeah, so we've lost that indigenous knowledge, and now here are these invasive plants that also come with their own cultural histories. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so obviously aloe is not invasive, but I would like to start, it kind of gives a nice framework because most people have worked with aloe medicinally. So, you've gotten a sunburn or even, a burn from the stove or something, and you've used aloe. So, coffee is also another herb that people are very familiar with, but I like to kind of talk about aloe because it perfectly illustrates the point about plant intelligence. This is a plant that has evolved to be exceptionally, just be a master basically at retaining moist, plump skin while thriving in the hottest, driest places on the planet. So this is plant intelligence. This plant, over many thousands of years, can survive in incredibly arid climates. And this is the gift that this plant offers us. is that its evolutionary genius of being able to have moist, plump skin in the driest place can be passed on to us. And then aloe is also both astringent, but and also moistening. And those are two things you cannot synthesize within science. You can't have both. You have to have one or the other, or at least I have not seen something do that. So this is like inherent amazing plant technology that we ourselves cannot replicate. Let's see, anything else I wanted to mention? Yeah, so hopefully that's, so just another example, oops. So this is couchgrass, so listed by the USDA as invasive. This actually came from an article from the Times, so also invasive in England, but I just like the little subtitle there. Couchgrass looks relatively benign, but can be a menace. But finding this in an urban environment, so going back to this yang dominated culture and environment, urban areas are yang dominated. So there's very little, so the soil is not exposed, it's covered with concrete. These are hardened places that, life can't thrive as well. So there's like constant water runoff, so that becomes dry. The sun beating down on concrete reflects back into the surrounding environment, creating, this heat sink. So couchgrass thrives in urban areas, and specifically look in this concrete crack, because it is cooling. It's cooling and moistening and soothes, but also breaks up hardened places. But this is exactly what it does for the body. So couchgrass is a diuretic. It helps flush the kidneys and the bladder. So this is literally a visual image of what it is doing to this concrete. It is trying to flush this out because we want to nourish the soil. This is what nature does. This is what plants have evolved to do. Couchgrass has the ability to break up kidney stones. So here we have, concrete that can be thought of like a kidney stone. So, if you have a kidney stone, you have dryness, you have hardness, you need to be able to bring softness, and you need to be able to bring moistening aspects to be able to flush that out. But this plant also soothes irritated membranes. So as you're passing a kidney stone, that is very helpful. So, but it also, couchgrass helps open passageways to allow the water through. So it can help treat benign prostatic hypertrophy. So that's prostatic enlargement. So anywhere where there's irritation and obstruction in the body, so it really helps deal with heat. So this like yang dominated heat in an urban area, but also heat within the body. Heat from and overheat from the body can come from overwork. When you overwork yourself, you dry yourself out, and dryness brings heat. So hopefully I'm using a lot of Chinese like 5-element theory in this, but hopefully the way that I'm talking about it makes sense. But also couchgrass is high in mannose, which is noted to prevent bacterial adherence to the bladder wall. So there's antibacterial properties as well. So just some of our common dandelion, violet and dandelion. This is actually a picture from my backyard on the left. So I have a concrete slab, and violet so when a plant flowers, that plant is happy. So, but here we have violet on the right, and this is violet really thriving in its natural habitat. So this is a moist, damp, shaded edge of Prospect Park where this picture was taken. So the leaves are larger, they're standing more erect. This is early spring, so the flowers are not out yet. Could have actually been after the flowers were done, but But my point here is that that violet will bring their wonderful medicinal attributes to these hardened places. So violet is used to moisten and bring water and flow to hardened places. So even though this plant is happy where this plant is, I think it's just incredible that violet's like, here I am. I prefer these very loomy, rich soils, but I'm here to help I'm here to help these break up this concrete here. Something that, obviously is not a positive attribute for someone who is, in the industrialized world trying to build for economy and progress. But plants, that's not what they're evolved to understand. So, and many of our common weeds like dandelion, Queen Anne's lace, goutweed, they bring the water element and nutrients. And so when we bring the water element, we're bringing flow and movement to the body. And violet is actually used in cancer therapy. And cancer is stagnation. It's a lot of things, but we have stuckness. We have something that has our body has not been able to clear, and that can be because there's thickness of the blood. There's the lymph has an overload, a toxic overload, or something like that. So violet is a wonderful lymphatic, but let's see, also a good blood purifier. Dandelion is a blood purifier. It helps thin and disperse excess fluid, actually. So when there's damp heat, so I don't want to talk too much about those, but so much more. So we are not a part of nature, we are nature. So when I talk about aloe and when I talk about violet and the rest of these plants, it really, when I do this sort of research, when I look into these plants and what their medicinal value is, I see myself in these plants. And it really reflects back to me that we are nature. We're the same. Our bodies and the land respond in the same ways. So we are products of our environment the same way plants are. They're constantly responding to our environmental comforts, but also the challenges. And that's why many herbalists will say, the plant, the herbal medicine that you should be taking is the one that grows closest to you, because you share the same environment and you're sharing the same comforts and challenges. I think that's all I wanted to say. So back to the disease tree. Just want to put that back up there. So before we take a deeper look into the medicinal qualities of other invasive plant allies, just remembering that we're dealing with constitutional imbalances. So, and also putting this out there, I would never, ever, ever, ever harvest or consume invasive plants from toxic sites. That goes for any plant. So I really advocate just learning the land. It's not a grab and go situation. It's not a just identify and, what can I use this plant for and what can I use that plant for? It's really learning the environment, and it's just vitally, vitally important, and it can take years. It's not fast. So Brendan Larson again, we feel we are losing something when one of these species arrives, for they force us to see ourselves when we look at the natural world. And I really feel like these plants really turn the mirror on the ways that we have destroyed the environment. So knotweed, Hu Zhang, I like to say the Japanese names. So considered is really leading the race in the most invasive plant in the industrialized world. It's a problem plant in England, in Portugal, in Slovenia, all of these places. So it's not just a problem here. It really takes the cake for one of the worst. So So the fresh young shoots can be eaten in spring. Roots harvested in spring or fall are utilized fresh or dried. In traditional East Asian medicine, this plant is a blood invigorating and stasis removing herb. So when I say that, I mean that it is helping to move toxicity out, and also help clean and invigorate the blood. So it's helping to invigorate the waters of the body. I really feel, and you know, any medical scientist would agree that the blood is the waters of your body. So this is what it is offering the landscape. So it helping to clear the waters of the body. The qualities are bitter and cold, astringent and drying. So it has a cold nature. So again, dealing with that yang excess heat of cities, and yang heat can be toxic heat. So toxic toxins in the environment, whether that's through industrial toxins or herbicide. And it can treat both internal and external heat toxins. So it can deal with pathogenic factors, so infections and things like that. And most blood invigorating plants will be aromatic plants, but however, this plant is very cooling. So I feel it's very specific to where there's yang dominated heat, like a city, or someone who lives in a city who's dealing with yang dominated heat. There's the root itself is what is used traditionally as medicine. So right here, and dealing with a lot of liver heat. And when we think about the liver eliminates toxins in the body. We have phase 1 and phase 2 detox in the liver. So our liver is really that helper to really being able to eliminate whatever might harm us. And so this plant is specific for the liver. And as an astringent herb, it's dealing with any excess dampness and phlegm. So anything where, you know, the waters have settled and become toxic and become high in pathogens that can create more disturbances. So just thinking about, where did Japanese knotweed come from? It evolved on volcanic rock in Japan. And this is where the medicine comes from. If a plant has evolved to break up hardened places in heat and dryness. So this is why it can bust through concrete, because it has evolved to do that over thousands of years. So the medicinal qualities being cooling and blood stasis removing. Just think about blood stasis removing because it's breaking through concrete. It's breaking through volcanic rock. So this is in the DNA of this plant to be able to do that. And this is what it does for the body. This plant can also be used to treat gallstones. And then these bottom pictures here are taken from Highland Reservoir in Queens. And so here's a pile that was trying to be eradicated by the Parks Department. And then we have Jackie Robinson Highway back here. And this site is full of lead, high lead, from the days of leaded fuel and cars passing this highway. So, and here we have not the same pile just a few weeks later. This plant is prolific. So just food for thought is that symptoms of lead poisoning in humans are pain, constipation, learning disabilities, slow growth, headaches, fatigue, loss of appetite. These are all signs of blood stasis. So, and when we have irritability and pain, that's blood stasis as well. So just like thinking about the land being, harboring this lead and wanting to heal themselves, the land itself wanting to heal themselves. So, is it possible that, the proliferation of this plant specifically being able to try and pull that lead up and out and move and be able to restore the soil? And as we know, lead is not easily removed. You have to actually do the work to do it. It doesn't just go away. So this is just a project that I did with Candace Thompson with, why am I not forgetting? So this is a class of high schoolers, and we just did some dyeing with knotweed. So this is just one of the things, many artistic solutions that we can employ. So we made native bee houses from the hollow shoots. So this is just, showing the food where we have the tincture, and also Andrew's New York City honey. This is actually from Prospect Heights, and you can tell that these bees fed off of knotweed because of the dark color of the honey. That's the buckwheat family. So knotweed is in the buckwheat family, and any plant that bees harvest honey from a buckwheat family, the honey will be darker. That's my point. So. Okay, so moving on to kudzu. So kudzu, as we all know, takes the people call it the plant that swallowed the South. But kudzu is very yin restorative and clears heat while generating fluids. So this plant restores the waters of the body while clearing heat and generating. When you generate fluids, you generate flow within the body so that it can release what it needs to release. So promoting secretions of pathogens. So, and wherever there's internal heat or inflammation, a fever, where the fever is drying up the fluids of the body, where, if you have a too dry of a state, it can't push out those pathogens. So a fever can get to a state where it's not healthy anymore, and you've dried out your fluids, and it can't expel those pathogens. You can do real harm to your organs. So kudzu can come in and can clear that heat while generating fluids. Let's see. So migraine, fever, stiffness as well. Let's see, I think that's all. And then, but when we think about kudzu being brought to the United States in 1876, to fight soil erosion. So there was human generated desertification of the South. This came from intensive farming of cotton, corn, and tobacco. So the soil was massively depleted, and we also see this happen. The results of this happen with the Dust Bowl. So, a little bit further like Midwest, but that was a direct result of intensive farming and soil depletion, the loss of the buffalo, many other things. So this plant was specifically brought to prevent soil erosion, and it was Congress actually established the Soil Erosion Service in 1933 and actually paid people to plant kudzu, because the South was indeed washing away. It's crazy, but not surprising. So, but, in 1941, we have Pearl Harbor and the US goes to war with Japan. So this plant, it has a massive cultural history of use as food, medicine, it goes up and down the line. Fiber, anything, in these parts of the world. So it's not a stretch to believe that that cultural knowledge was not implemented here because of the xenophobia and hatred around Asian people even back then, in 1941 when we went to war with Japan. So it's just something that I like to consider when we think about like, how did these invasive plants get so out of control? And really, I really believe it's just not an acceptance of these cultural histories. So, and if we were eating kudzu, I particularly believe, this is my opinion, but that kudzu may have not gone out of control. So let's see. What else would I wanted to mention? Yeah, that's about it for that one. So also just some other medicinal properties. Oops. Sorry. I think that was it for that one. Okay, so just some other medicine. So also, this is a clinical research study from Chinese medical herbology by Chen and Chen. So coronary artery disorder, hypertension. So I really feel there is an emotional level to losing heart in a culture that has succumbed to, is succumb with disconnection and separation, environmental destruction. So I really feel that root medicine gives us back our connection to the earth and our heart center. I really believe our heart center is the work that we do with the land. And any herbalist that you ask, root medicine will ground you. It will give that connection back physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So that's why I like to talk about it as heart medicine, because I feel we have really lost heart when we talk about invasive plants as in these demonizing ways. And I didn't actually talk about this with knotweed, but darn, well, we probably don't have time, but you know, heart disease is #1 killer in the US, and knotweed is also used in cardiovascular disease. So in arteriosclerosis, it's high in resveratrol. So these are plants that are high in antioxidants, are plants that grow in very extreme environments like volcanic rock. And in hot, deep sun. So a plant that gets a lot of ultraviolet rays will produce a lot of antioxidants. So I really just like to think about these plants as, you know, real medicine for our hearts, because there's such hatred around them. Yeah, one other. So I find it interesting that a plant that is so hated by humans could be an antidote for heart disease, both kudzu and Japanese knotweed. So this is also just, again, like that note, like food for thought. So here's some cultural, you know, I just like to list, I mean, I could put like a million pictures of what Japan, Korea, and China do with kudzu. But here's just what they call it, each in their own languages. So I'm not going to attempt to butcher them, but here they are. Heart disease is #1 killer in the US, and knotweed is also used in cardiovascular disease. So in arteriosclerosis, it's high in resveratrol. So these are plants that are high in antioxidants, are plants that grow in very extreme environments like volcanic rock. And in hot, deep sun. So a plant that gets a lot of ultraviolet rays will produce a lot of antioxidants. So I really just like to think about these plants as, you know, real medicine for our hearts, because there's such hatred around them. Yeah, one other. So I find it interesting that a plant that is so hated by humans could be an antidote for heart disease, both kudzu and Japanese knotweed. So this is also just, again, like that note, like food for thought. So here's some cultural, I just like to list, I mean, I could put like a million pictures of what Japan, Korea, and China do with kudzu. But here's just what they call it, each in their own languages. So I'm not going to attempt to butcher them, but here they are. Yeah, okay, that's all I want to mention about those. Okay, so purple loosestrife. So quote unquote, the purple plague. But this plant is very much prized by beekeepers, offers antibacterial elements for bees, but also for us. There are reports that $45 million is spent every year in unsuccessful attempts at eradication, which is often the case. When I was working in Highland Park, I did talk with the Parks Department head there, and he said that they had been injecting knotweed with herbicide and it was not working. And Dowa Ryan, in her book, she talks constantly about this, that eradication and herbicide use is 85% unsuccessful. But for the price that we pay, it's not worth it. So purple loosestrife dries up excess moisture and phlegm. So this is an aquatic plant. This grows in wetlands. So here we have a plant that has evolved the intelligence to be able to dry up excess moisture and phlegm. So this plant is responding to the wetland environment in which it thrives. But also, this plant is thriving in such abundance because this picture was taken on the east side of the Hudson River, where is home to agricultural land and monocropping and frequent tillage. And so monocropping and tillage being frequent practices that deplete the soil. So phosphorus-based fertilizers have to be used in abundance to counteract that depletion. So the result has been an abundance of phosphorus runoff downstream into these wetlands where we are standing in this picture. And this is Dina Falcone. She's a wonderful herbalist in Accord, New York. If you ever go up there, she's amazing. So, this is where, we're finding loosestrife in these wetlands that are downstream from these monocropped farms, and farms that have been monocropped for decades, for long periods of time, and not been rehabilitated, or nutrients, deep nutrients has not been replaced. So, okay, some other medicinal properties. So yeah, as I said, just this plant being an expert at drying up excess moisture, but when we have excess moisture, it's prone to microbial overgrowth. So this plant also has antimicrobial properties. So the plant evolving to have those properties to protect themselves. So, and within that, this plant also can clean pandemic infections and leach out toxins. So this is what this plant is offering the land, but this plant is what it can offer us because we are nature, right? Maud Greaves, herbalist from, like the 15th, 14th century, says that purple loosestrife, so this is how old this medicine is. This is hundreds of years old. This knowledge, at least, is hundreds of years old. Is superior to eyebright for preserving the sight and curing sore eyes, even blindness. And Rosemary Gladstar, popular modern day herbalist, using purple loosestrife for bronchial and lung infections. Okay, thanks so much for listening to all of this. I know it's a lot.
No, we want to listen to it and we appreciate it. We are so grateful for you sharing this knowledge with us. So we are grateful and humbled.
Awesome. I am humbled by your ears and your attention. So thank you. So yeah, so let's continue with loosestrife. So here we have loosestrife on the left. On the right, we have eyebright. So eyebright is a native plant that is currently endangered and has been endangered for a long time, and mostly because of climate change specifically. This plant is found in alpine and subalpine meadows where snow is common. So we don't have very much snow these days, or just, in the last couple of decades. So this is really quintessential. Yeah. So when climate change, polar ice caps receding, and the disappearance of native habitat like eyebright start to happen. So this is just one example of that. So yeah, we're really dealing with fundamentally changed ecosystems when we come in contact with invasive plants. And like we said before, like I said before in the slide with human disturbances, I mean, it goes along with so much. So those human disturbances are a lot of the landscape challenges, but just the fact of bringing other species to this land changes the ecosystem, humans included. So humans bring their own microbial life, their own microbiome. So yeah, we really live in a fundamentally changed ecosystem. So loosestrife is really here again, like the barberry and golden seal, to fill a niche. So purple loosestrife can be absolutely used very similarly to eyebright, and we can take the stress off of harvesting the rest of the eyebright and use purple loosestrife as herbalists and those of us who use that kind of medicine. So and I love that both of these plants are used for the eyes, to clear the eyes. And I've seen in poetry and in other references where eyebright is, birds use eyebright to clear the eyes of their babies when they have fungal infections, when they've been sitting in the nest. So yeah, I mean, this abundance of loosestrife is really, I feel like, a call to action to adapting clear vision towards this ecological understanding and restoration. So so yeah, just some other medicinal attributes, just drying up of runny noses, so allergies, watery discharge from the eyes, clearing bronchial passageways, particularly where there is heat, again, like that yang heat, the excess heat. So when there's pain and burning, sneezing, so both like the aloe, both being astringent and moistening, loosestrife is that way as well. So it can tighten. By astringent, we mean like tightening the tissues, so that if you do not have tight tissues, that's where bacterial overgrowth can start and where pathogens can lay within the cells and the tissues. So we want to tighten those membranes so that things can move and the body can push out what is harmful. So useful for wet coughs. So a cough that is like has hoarseness, congestion in the sinuses, the burning of your eyes. And again, like I said, there are microbial properties. So often herbalists use this for things like bacterial vaginosis, but also leaky gut issues. Again, if there's leaky gut, you need astringency to bring that gut tissue back together so that you can develop a nice microbial population within your gut to help process your food. So and then there's also antioxidant properties. These purple flowers are responding to that ultraviolet light, and there are antioxidant properties within there. So, moving on to Phragmites, another worst of the worst. Here's a picture of Highland Reservoir again. So this reservoir is just being overrun by Phragmites. But this plant clears heat and promotes the generation of fluids. So again, generating the fluids within an area that has toxic overload. So wanting to flush that out. And heat is really based in overload of toxicity can create heat, but also, we have the city behind us that is really a heat sink. So it's very cooling. It's often cold. So in Chinese medicine, it's often formulated. You don't always want that much coldness in the body. But really when there's a lot of toxicity where you have inflammation, so the rhizomes are used. So not this above part, but that part that lives just under the water, and actually just within the soil of the water, that sludge. So it's widespread throughout the United States, and there actually is debate over native and non-native variations. They're very much similar. And Phragmites, this particular species, is naturalized throughout the world. The origins are somewhat obscure, but the parts of Phragmites have been found in archaeological sites dating back 3,000 years. So a long time, just a really ancient medicine within Chinese herbology. So the rhizome is mostly used, but the root, stems, leaves, flowers, and seeds can also be used. Not what I'm going to be talking about here, but just for reference, the rhizome can be harvested year-round from wild plants, most specifically, obviously not cultivated. So the energetics are sweet and cold, so ideal for hot, toxic places of the land and body. So this plant, again, clears heat, but generates fluids. So when you have a fever that just won't quit, and you want your body to create a fever, that's a healthy thing. But when it's prolonged, it can damage and injure the body. So you want to be able to cool that down. So in cold and flu, fever, rash, rashes are heat trying to exit the body. So nausea and vomiting, cough and phlegm. Other traditional uses in Chinese medicine has been for various cancers. So generating those fluids to be able to push out those cells that have been overtaken by cancer. And ecologically, this plant in that list from Timothy Lee Scott, it is a long list of what this plant can help do as far as cleaning up toxic places. It's known to uptake 17 known human generated chemicals, explosives and pesticides included. So, and Timothy Lee Scott, he does say in his book that Phragmites serves as a chief water filter and detoxifier of the Earth's wetlands. So this is just a known bioremediator plant, and it's not being utilized in this way at all. So, and obviously, like I said before, I would never, ever harvest a plant that is doing the hard work of restoring the land body. Cannot be used to restore and revive a human body. So we have to harvest these plants in the ideal clean spaces where they can grow. So if they're doing the hard work in the land, they're not going to be able to offer that for you. So just want to say that one more time. So just another picture. I think this is really a good visualization. The hollowness of those rhizomes really shows the affinity for bringing coolness and flow to the body, sort of opening things up. So venting and opening the skin where there's a rash. So a rash is just trapped heat, and your pores are not opening up to be able to release whatever needs to be released out. This plant is also used for food poisoning, most specifically fish and crab, which I am allergic to. I have anaphylactic shock, where the body needs to open in order to expel the toxic food. So here we have the openings. We have this large opening, then we have these little openings around the edge, even in the skin of the plant. So also where there is lung heat with dryness, to open, again, those passageways of the lungs, like, you need to have your lungs open and the passageways clear. So when heat attacks the lungs and that damages the yin, so your yin waters, like keeping it cool and moist. So that can be seen with thirst. So that's dryness and, dry mouth, things like that. So that's when you have dryness, and heat is when that happens, like pain or dryness. So chest congestion can be dryness where you need to expectorate. Let's see. That's all. All right. So honeysuckle, this will be like the last one. So honeysuckle, also a cooling plant, even a cold plant. So also really great for just summer heat, even if you're not sick, but you're just like sick of the heat. This plant is a great tea for that. So clearing heat at any stage, whether it's just the summer heat or you actually have a fever, or heat that's destroying the tissues of the body. And one of the most potent antiviral herbs we have. So here in the East Coast, we have a lot of heat, but we have a lot of damp heat, humidity. That damp heat brings pathogens with it. So we need plants that are antiviral and antibacterial. And this is such a great plant that has both that cooling, but also will help deal with any sort of virus or bacteria. So fever, sore throat, perspiration, someone who has a forceful pulse, that's heat in the body. Bronchitis, any sort of itises, that's heat. Tonsillitis, laryngitis, those are heat signs. Irritability, so cools, heat, but also where there's irritability and insomnia, so like someone who is a little bit more overactive, because their heat is pushing them to do a lot of things, can create a lot of this just insomnia. You're up, so that's sort of like. And then the flower, so this is the part that's used as medicine, is the unopened flowers, which I think is really interesting, because this is a part of the active control that the wisdom of the herbal medicine, even like the knotweed, you're pulling up the roots, which, this is how the plant spreads. So with honeysuckle, you're doing something similar. So you're preventing pollination or seeds from happening. This plant also spreads through rhizome and through the stems, but that's why I also included, so the stems are also used in Chinese medicine to clear heat and release the exterior, just meaning open the pores to release heat out. It's a little bit more mild, but just another use there. I also really love to mention that with this really long tradition, yin, so the flowers of honeysuckle is Jin Young Hu, and then you have the same plant, same genus and species, but you have a different part of the plant and the Chinese name is completely different. It's Rendong Chen. So this is really deep wisdom, because you will know the part of the plant to use in medicine by the name. So this is just so wonderful for herbalists and anyone really wanting to learn the language of these plants. So there's just more knowledge within the name. Here we have Ailanthus. Didn't want to go without talking about Ailanthus, another real top invasive plant that people love to hate. So the stem and bark or root bark is harvested any time of the year. So here's some of the bark here, and that's what I used for this tincture. And like I said in the beginning, all of the plant matter that I use when I personally make medicine that I'm going to give to someone else, this comes from an herb shop in New York called Camwo, and they get their medicine from very well-screened sources. And this medicine is used by thousands of people. So it's very safe. I would never make this medicine from something I harvested in the city. So clears heat, Ailanthus clears heat, dries dampness, and binds the intestines to treat intestinal parasites. So binding the intestines just means that it is bringing them back together so that there isn't a lax state. If you have a lax state, that's where bacteria can get in and it likes to nestle, and parasites. So, you're pulling that organ back together to make sure that when the waters of the body are flowing, can push out anything that is going to damage those tissues. And that can happen to your body through many different ways. Overeating or not exercising. I mean, you can get lax states from excess dampness, eating too much damp food. Too much sugar is a damp food, can create dampness. So all these things we don't have too much time to talk about, but so let's see, again, clearing heat in our yang dominated world. So it's bitter and astringent, even cold. So this plant would need to be formulated. We don't want to cool the body too much, but when we are in a state where we have vaginal bleeding or leukorrhea, so these are this is bacterial heat that we were dealing with. So effectively treats parasites and fungus. Let's see. And it also can be used as a wash or an ointment. I also want to mention that native or not, these plants carry histories of use and efficacy. So 3 of these invasive plants, honeysuckle, mulberry, and phragmites, were used in the treatment of SARS and COVID in Chinese hospitals. Absolutely. So these are plants that are growing in our environment all around us. And they were used to treat COVID. And also I just like to mention that there's a disproportionate use of popular herbs just in the herbal world. So this really kind of takes accountability of that. So we're using what's in abundance to sort of counteract the sustainability issues of popular herbs. So non-native wild plants are our biggest food and medicine waste. So we gotta get on this. And I'll leave you with this last statement. We have separated ourselves from the land to such a degree that the very relevant or necessary cultural histories that come with these problem plants about their edible and medicinal gifts are lost to the fate of our own detriment. Returning this knowledge front and center will demythologize and destigmatize the decades of negativity around invasive plants. And I believe that to be very true. So these are just some projects that I've started. So you can dye with invasives. Here's mugwort, here's barberry, pokeweed that's native, but also very much an invasive native. Another thing I talk about on my website as far as myth busting invasives, that there are native invasives as well. So just drawing them, creating educational tools, painting. So obviously we have the apothecary. You can download this page from my website. It's an invasive coloring page, just some more drawings. So like all good environmentalists know, there is no away. Like it or not, these plants are here to stay, and it's up to us to expand our minds, extend our minds, and humble ourselves to the solutions that surround us. And then just shout out to these 4 books specifically for this project. If you ever just want to do more of a deep dive into any of what I've just talked about, these are 4 excellent books to look at. There's so many other resources, but these sort of tie it up. Dow Ryan is amazing. Her book really just, I mean, she's really the impetus for this project, and the way that she's been able to frame things as a restoration ecologist. But if you want to sort of take action in your own way, Beyond Pesticides is a wonderful organization that has like tons of facts, and they also have the National Pesticide Forum every year. There's the Institute for Responsible Technology, Friends of the Earth, United Plant Savers I mentioned before, doing wonderful medicinal plant conservation and really just land conservation in general that does not use eradication or herbicide use. So, and just contacting your local parks and rec. That's what I tried to do in New York. That's what I'm doing here now, and say no to herbicide. And if you have any questions or comments, pros or cons, constructive criticism, you didn't agree with something I said, or you want to add to it, or you want me to question something else, yeah, email me. Here's my website. I do post a lot of this research on my Instagram, Eclipta Herbal. So thank you. That's it.
Yes,